All right, it's a few seconds after the hour, so we're gonna wait for everybody to come in. Just want to start with some introductions. My name is Chase Berman. I'm FutureFeed Success Manager, and I'll be giving today's training session. Really looking forward to. Hey Brent, hey Brenton, how are you?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Good, good, thank you. Welcome, Jesse. All right, we're expecting a few others in this session, so we're gonna just give them another like maybe 30 seconds or a minute to hop in. It should be a smaller group today, and what I'd like to really to do to orient this session is really have it be as collaborative as possible. For the service provider training, it's a little bit different than what we would do for like end user training and go through all the different sections of the platform and sort of step by step and detailing the features and how to use them. Since you're representing service providers and partners of FutureFeed, I'd like to get as best of a sense I can for the specific features or implementation approaches, just like the general use of the platform that you're looking to execute with your clients. And we'll be able to dedicate the hour that we have today to those processes. And also, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time for just like the general things I'd like to go through for the training. But the more I can get a sense of what you're looking to execute and accomplish, like for your organization, but also with your clients, the better this I think this training session will be. All right, so like 15 more seconds or so we'll give them, but the session is being recorded. So a couple of hours from now, once everything digests in Zoom, expect to get an email from Zoom that'll have the copy of this recording link. If there are any issues accessing it at a later time, please just reach out to me or support@futurefeed.co, and we'll be happy to get that resolved for you. All right, so I will share my screen. I'd like to get started with just really explaining this initial page. So as a service provider, you'll most likely be using FutureFeed with multiple clients. And whenever you sign into FutureFeed, because you'd have access to their tenant, you would see a list of all the different clients that you have access to and some high level information really just detailing like what's currently going on or what has actually occurred in the client's tenants. You're able to click on any of those tenants and then either enter them or begin your work in them, but either way, you'll be able to access them accordingly. You'll be taken to the compliance dashboard page every time. Just depends on the tenant that you've actually selected. We're like 3 minutes past now. So that makes me think the couple of others that were supposed to come today are not going to, so that we could make this really whatever type of training session both you, Brenton, and Jesse would like to really get out of this. So you're absolutely welcome to unmute your mics and talk away, ask questions, etc. Or you can sit back and enjoy the presentation. You can also use the chat function as well. And so for the service providers in the industry, there are primarily like several different ways they're using FutureFeed to deliver their services. It could be through the gap assessment, documentation creation, management, creating the list of all the supporting inventory, and then going through a remediation plan or planning with their clients to get them to a first score of 110. It's really if the clients are deemed to address CMC level 2. But there's also the continuous compliance management, or some of our partners would call this like compliance as a service, and that will be really like a longer term solution for the clients aside from just everything they need to get done initially. So we'll be walking through those like 3 primary different things, and that really is encapsulated within this subway map on the top middle part of the screen. So that'll occur in documents, assess, where the gap assessment unfolds, and likewise with the Your FutureFeed sections. That's where the poem items and the projects are managed and stored. Just as a brief refresher on FutureFeed, everything is live and meant to resemble the most up-to-date information regarding whichever clients that you're currently supporting, how far along they are in their compliance management journey. So that is going to come down to a couple of primary things: having a up-to-date SSP, or the system security plan. You can do that at SSP section. You can also export SSP report as well. Likewise with plenty of other different types of reports. Really just depends on what you're going to be providing to like your clients, or maybe what they'd be expecting from the services that they'll be receiving from your organization. And so I'll start with the gap assessment, and then we'll dive into the documentation management, and we'll touch on tools and services as well. Actually, before we get into that, I just want to spend a few minutes on really like the kickoff engagement that service providers would be having with their clients in FutureFeed. Sorry for being a little out of sorts with that. But when you're starting the journey with your clients in FutureFeed, and it can happen through a couple of ways. Either there's a blank tenant and you're going to be really building this up like from scratch, or what many of our partners do, they have something that's called a service provider template subscription. So depending on the services, what types of organizations they are, different tools and services, etc. There's a lot of inherited processes that your organization as a service provider is going to be providing to your clients or those organizations. So you're able to build out a pre-populated like an environment that we would use to clone and onboard any new client of yours in the future. It's a way to directly enhance the expedition of your services that are going to be delivered through pre-populating the data to really ignite the kickoff engagement. And that can be as many different tools and services, documents you're going to have in your cloning environment. If you know that your clients are going to not have maybe a good amount of the objectives met during the beginning of the engagement, go through the different controls, mark the objectives as not met. You can also add them as met, add objective statements, but a lot of the data that you would be entering otherwise in like a blank tenant, which could take a good amount of time for one individual client, but multiply that amount of time or like the hours spent through all of them. It's a huge time saver for service providers using Feed if you elect to have that service provider template. I did just get a pop-up indicating my internet's a little bit unstable. So if my voice is coming in a little bit scratchy, please do let me know. I tried to reset the router about a half hour ago, but it just seems like something's a little out on my side. All right, so we've touched on the service provider template, the best that can have to a service provider or like a partner of FutureFeed. A lot of what the platform will provide to any service provider is everything around expediting your service delivery. There's a heck of a lot of enhancements we're going to build out in the future, but everything that's encapsulated in the platform as of today or like right now, I'll be walking you through those things so you can get a better understanding of how you can use FutureFeed to your organization's advantage. That will also play a role in really satisfying the client or possibly and hopefully meeting and exceeding their expectations. So I'll focus back on the kickoff engagement. With everything that you're entering in FutureFeed, this compliance dashboard page is going to become populated with more information over time, especially in this domain chart. It's really just resembling how far along the organization is in their gap assessment, really all the objective statuses that are being modified over time in the assess section. But for getting started with your clients, I know this is like the third time I've said that now, but we'll dive into that. You'll be focusing on two areas at first. So the start section and then the people section. You can go through either one first. It's really up to how your organization is going to be utilizing a FutureFeed tenant initially. When we go through the onboarding, we're going to be adding the partners or the service providers users first, and we will not be adding your clients. We want to enable our partners to decide when they'd like to add their clients to their tenant, then also kick off the engagement accordingly. So we'll hop into the people section first. There are several different types of users, and that really comes down to whether you're there to be a third-party user or an employee user. That's really determining like what organization you're a part of. So the third-party users, that would be everybody from your teams, for example, and your clients are going to be the employee users. But for the no access, standard, and admin access, I'll describe those three different types. So the standard and admin users are the ones that have the ability to enter the platform and then edit, review, view any information that they would like. The only difference between the two is the admins have the ability to add or remove or just manage other users. There may be situations where somebody needs to be documented on the organization's SSP, but they're not going to be doing any work like actually in FutureFeed. So you're going to list them as a user. You can associate roles to their profile as well. We'll jump into that when we get to here. But you can just give them no access. For much later down the road, when your clients are going to engage with the C3PAO to go through their actual assessment, there's two ways that you can go through that process, or you can have your clients go through and give any member. That is going to mean the assessors will be able to access the tenant, but only have read-only mode for the information in the live SSP and a portion of what's on the compliance dashboard page. to actually played a role in heavily expediting the assessment process. I think the industry average is about 6 to 7 days. With FutureFeed, it takes between 3 to 5. It depends on the C3PAO. I mean, really everything ready for them. It's really coming down to the lesser amount of questions that would be asked. The fastest assessments that have ever happened using FutureFeed, it was 7 hours and 52 minutes. I think was the shortest one, and then the other was maybe like 10 or so minutes after. But it's pretty much just underneath 1 business day. So for, I guess we've already gone through like the different users, types of access, and now I'll touch on the roles because there's a lot of power in this initial section. So for every user that is listed within a tenant, in this case, this would be for your client's tenants, we do recommend that a role is associated to every user. So we use the RACI model in FutureFeed to create different types of associations they're going to be responsible, accountable for, concerned, informed. And there could be a lot of different items that those associations are applied to for any given user. So in order for those types of connections to not be lost in the transition of something like the offboarding of an employee or somebody from an organization, and then the onboarding of their replacement, we recommend is, and we'll use like my user profile. I've got maybe a dozen or so different things associated to these roles. Before removing me, user, select the user that's going to replace me. And that will enable none of this information that's already connected to the role to be lost in the transition of that offboarding and onboarding process. And what I'm referring to with that, you can add the individual responsibilities tab. There's 3 different ways you can view this. The RACI model associations, any tasks that have been assigned to. You can only assign a task to a user through the role that they've actually been associated to. And any POM items that are connected to as well. This is the information that would not be lost in the transition of that offboarding and onboarding process if the, I guess like the role changes for the people is made accordingly through what I just described and sort of showed you. You're able to add as many roles as you would like. Likewise, with as many users in any tenant, we welcome all forms of collaboration within the tenant, but especially through how the OSCs or your clients are engaging with your own organizations, meaning service providers. And we need to do as much as we can to enable all organizations to on the same page about who's going to be doing what, who's responsible for what, but what are the actual assignments or different tasks that the client or the OSC is going to be accomplishing. Likewise, what the service provider is going to be accomplishing. So this also all intertwines with teams. You do have the ability to associate users and also roles into different groups that are going to be accomplishing different tasks or projects together. For making sure that certain controls are going to be addressed. List them out here, and the way that you can actually add people and roles to this, but also assigning the team leader, which is up here on the top right, you're able to select any of the options from here. But you'll notice that there's 4 roles here. Likewise, with 2 specific users that have been incorporated into this team. The only way you'll be able to select the team leader is by actually selecting somebody from this middle column, individual users. That's why we're seeing Creighton and Joe listed as the only ones available to select. I'd like to get like a jump start on populating teams in FutureFeed. We had taken the time to build out the different teams that can apply to any given organization. For smaller, not all of these are going to apply, but for very, very large ones, you might have clients that are of like the enterprise tier that we categorize for 2,000 full-time employees and above. The majority or possibly all of these different teams we have tagged them to the controls. So that's going to expedite the process of actually these teams and the roles that are associated within them to the different controls that they're within any of the controls under the interview section for the RACI model, and likewise within the SSP. So all this data, again, that you're entering within FutureFeed over time, that is going to automate your SSP for you. And for you, meaning your clients. This is something that you can explain to them along the way as well. But they'll also be able to see that for themselves if they've accessed the platform. All right, so I'll switch over to the start section. So everything I've been described is really meant to be a part of that kickoff engagement you're having with the clients. It's like a 1 or 2 hour session, but it really just depends on how long it takes to get the initial information in here. There is a getting started guide within FutureFeed. into all the different sections within the platform. It's available for any tenant you'll have access to. We do your clients that they go through and read this information so they have the best possible understanding for really what the different features are on the page they're looking at, how to understand the information they're entering, and really like why this is important or why it matters. We've also, and I mean, it does have compliance implications as well. We've also added information about how this can actually apply to the assessor. So getting your clients to pass their assessment, I know it's more time periods for your clients. I mean, especially for those just like using a platform in general, but we want to do everything we can from the FutureFeed, like GRC platform perspective, to enable everybody to have not only just a lot of confidence going into the assessment because of the way the SSP is structured and everything you have from a like supporting evidence, documentation, objective statement implementation processes, all of that defined, than actually passing the assessment. And ideally, the more time that everybody's able to save throughout all of the data that's going to be entered into FutureFeed initially, and also during the assessment, it means it's more time available to your clients to focus on their other priorities or just projects they have, but especially from the service provider perspective, a stronger leeway engagements, you're going to be able to start with them promptly. Ideally, what that will result in is more revenue for your organizations. So we've touched on a lot of things at a high level, taking a dive into some of the more to take that in-depth approach for everything in the start section. Before we get there, I just want to take a brief pause and see if there are any questions about some of the topics or features that I've talked about so far. No questions? Okay. Again, you can feel free to unmute and just ask away at any time. You don't have to worry about interrupting me. It's not rude at all. I want to make sure that we're able to address the things that are most important to each of you today for the time that we have. And also you can just add questions in the chat box as well. So the start section is meant to encapsulate this really high level information about your clients. It's defining like what the organization is, and the people section goes into who the people are that are playing a role in this process. And you can add users for your own organization as a risk provider. So some information in the corporate data that is on the onboarding side. Then your client is going to be able to add more information, just describing things about their company size and then giving an overall description, but they can also add information pertaining to their cybersecurity budget and cyber insurance. Down on the right side of this information icon, this is always describe why what you're looking at. It will complement what might are, but there's also green information icons that's going to give you like that detailed description of like what this feature is. So for example, about the NAICS code, and there are going to be some cases where we have a lot of information in here. So you can click the learn more icon and you'll be able to see the full description of what we wanted to provide to users. Yeah, so your clients can go through the process of adding the information for these different questions, and they'll be able to get a sense of the stuff that's required through the all the things that don't have any information in them yet. If they're highlighted in red, they'll also have whether it's a physical or electronic data location. Clients are going to be able to add little place cards, or I don't say little, like just place card holders for this information. It's really just having a place to indicate that this is where the data that your clients are working with and really processing, transmitting, storing, not CUI, but really everything that pertains to what's a part of their assessment scope. So I actually do want to correct myself, though, that will be containing CUI, but it's just entered into FutureFeed, meaning the CUI itself. So I'd like to point out the connect and then the task assignments become more relevant in the tools and documents section. So I'll touch on that once we get there. But I just wanted to briefly indicate that also applies for any inventory item that you're going to be creating. So part of the kickoff engagement will encapsulate the scoping conversation. So your clients might not have a grasp on really what scope is applying to their organization. It could be a program enclave, enterprise-wide or like the entire company. It might just be an organizational unit, but the scoping designation that's selected here, that is representing what the SSP is representing. So if your clients are going to be having, or if they might have multiple locations throughout the country or different SSPs or multiple boundaries, they would need multiple tenants. So in that case, it's going to be important to make the correct designation here for the scoping selection. This is really representing the one SSP that comes with the tenant that is purchased. Basically, every FutureFeed tenant represents one SSP. So you're able to enter a few other pieces of information pertaining to the number of admin and end users. But below here in these larger boxes, this is where you're able to define or describe the system boundary and then also articulate like the overall function or purpose of the system. These two boxes will be incorporated into the SSP as well. And basically everything that it has an asterisk will be a part of, or visible in the SSP. For the contracts, clients are able to enter relevant case codes to their organization, likewise with creating initial orders for their contracts. So it's just information about like what the title of the contract is, optional description, optional contract number if they'd like to enter that, start and end date, then associate the case code to the contracts, any frameworks that apply as well. It's going to be CMC level 1 or 2. And then you do have the ability to make associations to the DFARS clauses below, and likewise with FAR and ITAR and EAR. For the data inventory section, so this is pertaining to the tools and services that are going to be created in this tools section. You have the ability to define them as asset or something that stores or transmits CI. You'll also be able to do the same for CUI and non-commercially sensitive information. So for any of the tools and services that are storing or transmitting FCI, you'll be able to see all of those here. But in order to get them to be a part of, in this case, this 6 count for the tools and services, simply just click on this icon, and once that switches, you'll see that appear above and the number will update to whatever the next value is. And the tools and services that can be defined as a CUI asset, you'll see this page here and all of these different CUI categories. They're hyperlinked to the CUI registry within our website. So any user for a tenant is able to click on any of these and then go straight to the primary source to learn more about the particular types of information, and also if that would apply to any of your clients. But you'll notice that there are some different checkboxes that are marked, and then also some different tool icons with a number next to them. So you do have the ability to make the selection of clients able to do this. It's really meaning to, if they know or you possibly know as a service provider, that this information is relevant, to the organization. But in order to get these icons to appear, and I'll jump into the tools section to show you how to go into the data inventory section to view all of the active tools and services, also those that are in like the pending status. It just means a POA might be created for them because some work still needs to be done to maybe implementing them, or something might need to be adjusted. So under the CUI column, to the left side of this this chart highlighted in yellow, you'll be able to see this. It's like one of the monuments or so, like in DC. But some of these are highlighted and others are not clickable. The only way that this is going to become highlighted and clickable is if this particular item is categorized as an asset category, or sorry, a CUI asset for its category. You can just make the selection. Now, in order to get this number you're seeing for the 4, it's referring to the 4 different types of CUI, whether it's CUI basic or specified. You can see from the list here below. This is the exact same information that we were seeing on the previous page, minus the other associations for the other tools and services. That's not relevant for this particular one. So you're able to make the selections here, and that's what's going to, over time, populate more information on the previous page that we were seeing. So that's how you can go through the process of categorizing your different assets as a CUI asset or tools and services that store or transmit FCI. I'll just go back into the start section here. We'll just briefly touch on or this non-CUI commercially sensitive information. It's the very similar process of just selecting the icons here. And through everything I described for the CUI tools and services, you can follow the same process for the sensitive data ones as well. For the settings sections, so there is a powerful features in here, I guess at least for like 2 out of the 3. All 3 are important, but I want to spend a little bit of time describing the ticket system integration and then the organizational scale ratings below. So if your client would like to have like individual poem items or projects which can encapsulate multiple poem items sent to their ticketing system, maybe something like if in ServiceNow or any particular email you'd like these things to go, you can enter the email here. Make sure this box is checked. FutureFeed section. This is where all the poem items are. Likewise with your projects and the project portfolio page. You're able to just simply click this icon here, and that will send an email for this particular poem item to the email that's in the ticketing system integration side. The exact same thing would apply to just click on the icon here. Right, for the poem goals, so whenever gaps are identified, you're going to see a couple of fields appear for the poem item, and one of those will be the due date. So you can select a specific due date in the future, like November 10th, 2025. But the initial date that you're going to see, it's based off of a quarterly basis, and that's going to come down to how far out you have a setting to apply here. So in this case, create a poem item in this sample company that we have. It's like our demo environment. Any poem items be set for its default due date of 2 quarters out. You can extend this all the way up to 2 years or 8 quarters away. I'll just have that go back. It's like it was being a little fidgety there. So the other thing with the poem items is you have the ability to set the impact, effort, and service provider perspective. You're able to like talk about this with the clients if you would like to, or somebody can make the selection for how impactful like actually completing the poem item is to your client. Does it require a lot of effort? Is it going to cost the organization a lot in order to address this particular item? The exact same thing will apply to the projects you'll build out as well. You're able to modify these selections whenever you would like, and the client can as well. But these different ratings are really subjective to how this would be interpreted by your clients or individually if you're managing multiple clients in FutureFeed. So for smaller clients, the costs might be very different numbers here. On the smaller side, for your very large clients, could be sort of similar to this or even much larger. Where this will play a role in like the longer term use of FutureFeed when you're going through the remediation plan and execution processes. It's usually an additional service that service providers can provide. I'd like to touch on that a little bit while we're on that topic. So just take a brief pause. We're not going to go like left to right entirely through this as we're talking about different things, especially in these earlier sections. It does relate to the other areas later on in FutureFeed. So I want to make sure that we really talk about those points in depthly and go through all the different features related to that. But before I continue, are there any questions at this time for the stuff that we just covered over the last about like 5 or 10 minutes or so? Just a chance to get some water. Okay. So once you've gone through the gap assessment with your clients and you might have identified gaps or created poem items for the different documents and tools and services, you're at the point where you're going to be able to present a plan for them for the remediation approach. That'll be addressing all of their different poem items, likewise with projects that you're recommended to group them into. So you're able to see all the different poem items here, use the filtering metrics to actually just have a more defined scope of the specific poem items you'd like to look at. I want to point out the impact, effort, and cost ratings that appear here. So this third poem item, when it was created, there was no impact, effort, and cost rating that. So when you're coming to this page and you're trying to figure out what types of projects or what different projects you want to group these different items in, if you don't really know how impactful or anything related to the impact, effort, and cost, and during this part of your service execution. So that's why we do recommend you take a moment, or the client can take a moment to just fill out the impact, effort, and cost ratings when a poem item is created. And that will happen on an individual by individual basis. You can group poem items into a project and also multiple projects, as you can see from this 4th item on this list. It's a part of 5 different projects. We enable users to do this because they might not know right out of the gate. These are like the 15 projects we're going to have these specific items going to execute. We allow you to go through like this draft planning process. But especially from the service provider perspective, we're enabling you to go through that process specifically on behalf of your clients, or maybe collaboratively with them. So you are able to add many POEM items to different projects and vice versa as you would like. And you are able to complete this initial process. You'll be able to see the different projects over here. And you will need to set the impact, effort, and cost ratings for these projects individually. It doesn't automatically do that through like the summarization you can get from those different ratings. So I'd like to take you into what one of these looks like and talk through how you can then present this plan to your clients and get them to really understand the timeline that it's going to take to address these gaps, but really for their management or executives, understanding for the impact to the Spurs score, but especially from like a cost perspective, and knowing that you from the service provider perspective are going to be executing the things that are most important to that particular client. And that's a decision that will be up to them, but you'll be able to work with them to identify that process. So if we scroll down, you're able to see all the different POEM items that are part of this project. Hopefully the impact, effort, and cost ratings are assigned or for the POEM items. You can set them initially, or for all 4 of these different things, you can set them initially when the POEM item is being created. So we do recommend taking advantage of it then, instead of doing it later on at this point in the process. More information you can have in later sections of FutureFeed, eventually when you start working within them, better off everybody will be, especially for saving time and getting all of this stuff organized. So there you can go about executing the projects in like a certain order, for example. One of the things I've seen very beneficial for our partners or those that execute or provide like remediation services, they're creating as many projects as necessary, but they're going to be executing the ones that are like the quick hitter projects. So the highest level of impact, they don't require anywhere close to a lot of effort in comparison to some other projects, and it's not going to cost the client a lot for these projects to be executed. But the impact, from my opinion, and also what I've seen in other sort of examples or calls I've had with other partners, it's really pertaining to the Spurs score impact. So the increase, the Spurs score. Now, this value of 35 is going to be determined through all the different assessment objective POEM items that are part of the project. So you're able to group projects in this fashion and then execute accordingly through the remediation planning. Like for the projects that would really not have like a very high level of impact, but they will require a lot of effort and they will require a lot of cost. I have seen those projects be executed later down the road, but like I said, this is flexible. It's up to you and your clients how you'd like to structure this out. But it would be really, or personally, I think it would be really valuable for you to present the tentative plan to your clients. So it's less time they need to spend on their own trying to think about not know how to go about this, but especially addressing, that's why they've ideally hired you as a service provider. So you can flip-flop the approach that I just mentioned. It's really up to you how you'd like to go about executing this process. So for the remediation planning and execution, this is where everything will be encapsulated, at least from visualizing the POEM item and then executing the projects. And then at the end of this, your clients will have ideally a 110 Spurs score. That'll be resembled up here on the top right and also visible on the compliance dashboard page of the platform. Are there any questions about like POEM management or project execution in FutureFeed that I can address? Or is there anything anybody would like to learn a little bit more about that I might not have touched on? I think this would be a great area to ask some questions about. And I also don't want to run with the assumption that I'm like hitting on everything that you're thing of this. I'd like to know so I can address those for you. You can also reach out to me separately if you would like, but yeah, the time that we have here together and hopefully can be as collaborative as possible. So I want to make sure that I'm able to be as like best form of assistance and support as I can be. Okay. All right. We will now get into the documentation management. So oftentimes for clients, or I guess in this case, your clients are the OSCs of the industry. Creating the documentation that they did and then implementing that, it's going to be one of the more time-consuming processes. At least I've heard that from many organizations. I can't speak for everybody. So if your clients don't have their documentation already, or they might have some, but they're really not sure that it's really good enough, part of what your organization may do for them is help them with documentation creation and implementation. Your organization may have its own documentation templates. So I'd like to touch on that last concept first. So if your organization does provide documentation templates that will then be implemented for each individual client, what you can do in FutureFeed to help expedite that process is incorporate that into your service provider template, that cloning environment that I mentioned earlier in this training session. So the way you can set that up, and this take away like the perspective of now this is the client's environment, just envision this as your service provider template environment. Be able to create all the documents in here. I would recommend keeping them as live documents so you can continue to update them in this cloning environment. So that'll be more updated for the future clone for new clients. Or you can access something called our library site. Now that's a separate site of FutureFeed, and I'll take you to there or take you to that now. So I can show you what this looks like. And this library access comes at no additional cost for service providers. So envision 5 to 10, 20, 30, all the way up to like 70, 80, 100 plus clients that you're managing in FutureFeed. The more clients you have right to them, you could come across, most likely will, a lot of duplicate data entry for updating the information in the new versions of the documents. So in this library site, documents that you're providing to your clients are going to be managed. You have the ability to do and then decide to then push them to all of the clients that are connected to this information. We set that up on our side, ideally when we onboard a new client, or you can just let us know you'd like to connect your library information to any specific client tenants. You'll then have the ability to populate those document templates in the client's tenant. But to make this like powerful combination of the library site and your service provider template, your service provider template should be connected to the library information as well. That way you don't have to worry about also making the updates in your service provider template in that individual environment. So for all the documents you may have in that library site, you'll see a listing, like say like the third one here, be something X or service provider X. See the list of the available like total templates, or sorry, the amount of total templates and the ones that are still available to use. This number might be a little bit less, as you can see here from this example, because 3 of those templates have already been populated. Now you do have the ability to tag these documents. You can do so in the library, right? And then when they're here, you can simply just populate them or create them as live documents simply by adding them as the copy document. So you're just copying the template version. Or if you want these to just be populated, but only available in read-only mode, you're going to be adding them as linked template that's associated or really being stored in the library site. It's up to you how you'd like to populate those templates. But to really bring home this concept of the library site utilization along with the service provider template, what we would recommend is, one, if you don't have like a library site set up and you'd like to explore this, please let me know. I'm happy to documentation templates. Again, if this applies to the services that your organization provides to clients. So you add all the different documents here. You're able to create different versions of them, ensure that they're published as well. And I won't dive into all the different features in here now. I do want to stay conscious of the time we have remaining for the rest of the training. So if you do want to have the library site set up for your organization, you would go through a more like specific training session with one of our team members. Take like maybe 10 or 15 minutes or so. Excuse me, somebody just tried to call me. So you can manage documentation templates in here, but you can also do the exact same thing for summary notes on the control level. Same thing with publishing different versions. So that definitely, or it would directly go hand in hand with the amount of duplicate data entry that you might need to do otherwise, and minimizing the amount of time having to be spent on that. Again, multiple would take to do so in one client tenant, but the amount of clients you have that you're envisioning having in the future, this could end up saving your organization hundreds of hours over time. And if you really have enough clients in FutureFeed, after X amount of time, or like multiple years you'll be working with them, it could be thousands of hours. would be ashamed to have that be otherwise spent on the same duplicate process, additional opportunity for your organization to work with and also win new engagements. We really care about how effective and efficient our partners, hence the service providers for the client, can be able to utilize FutureFeed's different features and functions to expedite your service delivery, making sure that you can do everything you'd like to effective, add further enhancements in the future, but I'm going through the stuff that we have now today. Right, so we've talked a little bit about the documentation management in FutureFeed. We're going to go into more detail about that. I just want to conclude the point about the library template and the service provider template. Set up everything in the library site first, connect that to your service provider template so you have that information in there, and then that in your service provider template, and then you can go through the processes of adding the different tools and services that may apply, your organization CRM, which you can add as a document in the library, but then tagging these different inventory items in these sections to the controls they're relevant to. Now, what that will look like is when you're in one of these inventory item cards, this connect section. So it's a way for you to identify the controls that this particular access control policy, for example, is relevant to. You have different ways to identify those controls. It's really a scientific word. They can name either with control name, the control description, anything that's illustrated for the objectives. Likewise, the guidance information that FutureFeed encapsulates within every single one of the controls. There's a huge piece of automation to this that I'll get to in like a few minutes or so. But this will allow you to then have all of this information for all, I guess, tagged to the controls, appear as supporting items in each of the controls under, I guess, within the gap assessment section, then also in your SSP. Any tasks that are created for these individual items that are then completed, that's your evidence. That is also going to be a part of what you'll see in the SSP output because the tagging has been done. In my opinion, that's one of the most impactful features that the platform has from an automation perspective. Having an accurate and well-structured SSP is something your clients are going to need to rely on for when they're going through their C3PAO assessment. So by using FutureFeed, you're going to be able to provide that exactly for them and to them. Right. So I'd like to touch on, I guess, a little bit of what we already described before, but for documentation management, FutureFeed, every tenant that is purchased comes with 57 documentation templates. It's meant to be a good starting basis for an organization. It can also be in complement to the templates or the documents that your organization is going to be providing to your clients in case it's not like a full set. So it's a good starting basis that can be used by anyone and they're connected to controls already. Now, for documentation management, there's a couple of ways you can go about this process. We do make a high recommendation on doing live documentation management instead of just adding attachments of those documents over time, so like a PDF or Word file. By adding attachments over time, when you're going through like compliance review period for a document, you're probably going to make some changes that the latest version of that document is then added as an attachment also. But you'll end up having multiple versions of the document here. How do you know which one is the most up-to-date version, especially for creating tasks off of? That is where the live documentation functionality will be of a higher level of benefit. Think of it as an automatically saving Word document. Everything you enter into a live document in FutureFeed will be saved automatically, but we also allow you to do different, I guess, version history or creating different versions of the document. So whenever a change is made, it will save, but this publish icon will appear. And note right above this, we're on version 6. If I click this publish icon, we're now in version 7. So what that is going to allow an organization to do is store these multiple versions of the document in FutureFeed, but it's not individual files. You're always looking at the most live up-to-date version of the information. You also have the ability to restore the previous versions if you would like. So it'd be especially beneficial for the versions that you may be publishing over time within this library site. Then you'll be able to see those appear here as well. So within each of the individual client tenants, you're able to make those changes or revert back to a previous version if you would like to. Now, for approval, usually that will require some authoritative person within an organization's signature to be like a part of the document. The way you can accomplish that is through creating a task for the particular document and then having that be sent to the appropriate person. They'll get an email notification about this as well whenever they've been assigned a new task. We also touch on this in a lot of detail during like end user feed. We do recommend that you go through training 1 and 2 feature perspective instead of like the service provider perspective. Just meant to just be beneficial to everybody. So this is an example of what one of the tasks would look like. This is an exact replication of the live version of the document. So it's just a copied version of it. So that's why if you're using live documentation, like management functionality, you're going to see this appear in the task. Uploading an attachment, you're not going to have this information appear from what would be reflected in the attached document. So if Mark Berman is going to be the one that needs to have his signature on this task, he would complete his process here. Okay, it's all done. Save, complete for the task. Add any notes if the user would like to, and then actual signature here. Going to be captured within the task. Sorry, in the evidence that's created. And now you've just created that approval process or the documented approval for this access control policy. The exact same thing can apply to any other documents. Now we're viewing all the evidence that's been associated to this particular document. The exact same thing applies to tools and services as well. Just depends how you like to create those tasks. You're able to see the person that completed these tasks. In this case, I've done all of these. This is like my go-to for training demos. And then the date that's associated as well. And you're able to email this task or this evidence to somebody if you'd like. Likewise with downloading it as well. Are there any questions about what we've gone over for documentation management thus far? There's a couple other things that we'll get to before we move into tools and services. Okay. I think actually to stay conscious of time, we won't jump into tools and services. I would recommend like registering for the end user training 1 session, because going through your clients, I think would be more important to get some training on aside from just learning how to create different tools and services. That's really like it's pretty self-evident. Right, so you can view all this information in a couple of different ways, but if you'd like to have a sense of all the different tasks that are pertaining to these individual items, be able to go to this evidence status page. So in green, it's going to indicate all of the pieces of evidence that have been created over the last year. In red, it's the amount of tasks that are currently overdue, and in yellow or /orange, it's the amount of tasks that are currently pending, so they're waiting to be completed. It's just another way to visual, but a more direct scope to the task information. Couple different documentation types within the 2 different categories that we have. Whenever you're creating a document, you're going to be able to put them in the appropriate section or however you would like to. All right, I want to spend probably like the remainder of this training session in the assess section. I'll walk you through how to go through the gap assessment with your clients or for them. So this landing page, all of these different color icons for the different controls, it's indicating what's happening at objective level. Green is for all the objectives are marked as met. Red, at least one objective is marked as not met. For blue, nothing's happened to the objectives. No status update has been made yet. And if any of these controls are not applicable, you'll be able to see that appear here in gray. Now, over time, there are going to be a lot of changes made to the objective statuses. A way for anybody to view that is in this objective status change history feature. Just wait for this page to appear. So this will really encapsulate the life cycle of the client's tenant. All the changes that are made to the objectives over time, it's going to document the dates, the time, the user, their email, the particular objective, and then the status change that it was updated to. You can also export this information if you would like. Now, when you're assigning different controls or associating users to different controls, looking at 110 of these can get a little confusing. And if I'm just assigned to 10 of them, I'm not going to know exactly right from this view which 10 of those controls I'm supposed to actually be orienting my time. Could get a little bit lost, confused, and end up wasting time trying to figure out the places within FutureFeed where I really should be prioritizing my efforts. So to take that potential issue out of the equation, click this icon here and you'll switch to the My Controls view. So right now I have the 4 different like concepts or functions in the RACI model applied. It just so happens for this, and this is a great way for you for the controls that they know that they need to be doing something, and then they can simply enter the control and continue or begin their process therein. All right, so for the gap assessment, I actually just want to go back and switch this view because you aren't able to see all the rest of the controls that's visible within this domain. So when you're going through the gap assessment with your clients, there's a good amount of information here, but I'll walk you through how this operates. So the summary notes, this is meant to be that brief story for how the control has been implemented, but it's really meant to complement what's being articulated. This is the clear separating sentences or phrases for how each specific objective is being implemented. This will appear on the SSP as well. So when the assessors are reviewing this information, they're not going to have to go soul searching through 5-6 paragraphs worth of data just to identify how objective A for 3.1.1 has been addressed. Now, this pop-up also will include a way for you to indicate the inheritance at the individual objective level. So if you've gone through the process of adding the CRM document in the document section, and then for the tool or service that is actually providing that inheritance function, you're going to be able to associate the CRM to that, likewise with the relevant vendor. Make sure the tagging for that tool or service is there or is already set. That's why you're going to be able to select the particular items you're seeing actually clickable here in this page, as opposed to the top 2 items. It doesn't have a CRM associated to the 2 different. You'll be able to indicate either if there's no inheritance or if it's going to be partially inherited or fully inherited. The CRM should describe the inheritance or the processes to justify the inheritance. But if it is partially inherited, we do recommend that you just take you're just able to do so through any of the pencil icons you're seeing here. All right, so let's say that your clients don't have some of these objectives already met right out of the gate. We'll go with objective D. We'll see a 1 is here next to this poem icon. It's because when we marked this objective as not met, this poem item became populated or became created, and it comes pre-populated with information. This is another way that's meant the creation of a product that can take a long time to create. That could be for the 320 assessment objectives. So we're trying to have like a more streamlined process for this, but we do recommend that everybody reviews the poem item so they can understand the action. And if you as a service provider would like to modify this or change it, you're absolutely more than welcome to. This is an example of where that impact, effort, and cost rating applies to the poem item, the due date, the RACI model as well. At the minimum, we recommend that somebody is listed as the accountable person for every single item the RACI model applies to. The way it's at least documented within FutureFeed that this person is ensuring that whatever the process needs to get done or whatever item is referring to is going to be accomplished. And from a high level, instead of needing to click all the different objectives to see if they're active statement, look at this column here and like the middle part of your screen. Any statement flag that's green, and you just hover over there, able to see if you what. Then for this teardrop icon, this water drop, the half-filled one, it's partially inherited. Blue, it's fully inherited. And then the number that you're seeing, it's really referencing the amount of tools and services it's associated to the level of inheritance. So potential assessment consideration statements for the is that we welcome everybody to do to enhance the client PAO. These questions or statements are really meant to mimic what the assessors could be thinking about or possibly asking the client during the assessment. Now, there are 3 stages to the assessment: interview, examine, and test. So we encapsulate all of that information in each of the controls for the SSP. So the RACI model will address the interview phase or the portion of that assessment. The assessors will probably want to speak with the accountable person first for this control, then they might go to the body for consulted and informed. Now, examine and test. This is really coming down to the supporting inventory, the supporting items you have or your clients will have to really justify and prove that the objective statements they've articulated actually have evidence behind them. The fact that they're indicating this objective is met, well, here's how it's being done. So all the different documents are going to be associated here. If you've applied the tagging, that's why we're already seeing this list appear. The evidence won't be listed. It's only going to be visible in the live SSP section, or the exported SSP in the evidence file export. It's a zip file of all the documents and different pieces of evidence as well. But the test portion of this is going to encapsulate the different tools and services, but it's really coming down to, at least my opinion, like testing all of this stuff and examining it. It's encapsulating the review of the evidence as well. It's like the cherry on top of the information that you're going to be providing. So one of the major points like throughout this training session that I'd now like to really hit home on is this functionality of tagging. So it's connecting or it's creating and connecting this relationship between the essential supporting information, likewise with its evidence, to the various processes that you're marking at the objective level for all of the controls. The tagging is done, you're not going to have to worry, and especially your client will not have to worry about the fact that their SSP is being automated for them in the exact structure that will enhance the assessment process. It's one of the biggest benefits to using FutureFeed, especially for the assessment process. But for the way that you can explain how FutureFeed approaches related to what your client needs to do initially to the end goal of passing the assessment and then managing and maintaining their compliance over, FutureFeed addresses all of that for them. But I'd like to take a step back from that. It's not FutureFeed doing this. We're an extension of your service offering. So it's really your organization is able to provide this expedited service delivery and long-term management to always ensure that your client is really able to prove their compliance at any time. And throughout the various functions that you'll be able to become very familiar with and ideally incorporate into your organization's typical processes and workflows with engaging with clients, it'll become a really similar process for when you're engaging with your clients. It might differentiate a little bit depending on the client type. So we've got about 3 minutes. I do want to open the floor again for any questions that either of you have for the stuff that we've gone through today. I know we hit on everything. It's pretty much impossible to go through the entire training for FutureFeed in an hour. So I'll be breaking the end user training into 2 different 1-hour sessions. So training 2 for end users will touch on some more features within Assess, SSP, and your FutureFeed section. We hit on them a good amount. And end user training 1 will go through the start and documents as well. Are there any questions that anybody has for me or about FutureFeed in general, and especially about things that are really important to your organization through the services that you provided that I might not have hit on yet? Okay, that's totally okay. Well, I hope that this has been a really beneficial hour for each of you here. And if anything was missed or questions come up a little later on, please feel free to reach out to me or email support@futurefeed.co. You can also register for future training, but I would recommend registering for the end user trainings. This is pretty much what the service provider training will include. But an interest in exploring the functionality of the library site, so again, everything that's encapsulated here, please reach out to me or email sales@futurefeed.co, and we'll be happy to set that up for you and then have a more in-depth training session on that specific functionality. That will also go hand in hand with supporting the use of the service provider template. So that is an add-on cost for a service provider. It's $3,588 a year. Some partners have multiple service provider templates. For any additional one, you get just as there's supportive pricing for that. It's very similar to any additional tenant any of these may need. So please think of me as one of your primary contacts for FutureFeed in general. I'm happy to help with whatever I can. I am our success manager, direct everything sales side and like the sales department as a whole. Likewise, with overseeing a lot on the customer service and support. Likewise, with partner relationships. Our whole team is here to support each of you as best we can, and we'll be able to best do that by the more we know how we can help you or things we might be missing in general. We're here to help however we can, and just want to take another moment to thank you all very much for your time today. The recording will be sent from a couple of hours from now, most likely. If you have any issues accessing that recording, please reach out to support@futurefeed.co and we'll be happy to help. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And thank you again.